Hello, and welcome to Meet Your Alderman, a podcast that aims to inform Chicago residents about the people who represent them. I'm Sarah Scott, newcomer to Chicago, who has somehow gotten by without trying deep dish for her first 6 months here.
And I'm Eric Eber, lifelong Chicagoan who drives a car that desperately needs a wash after all the salt it's been exposed to this winter.
Back on January 12th, we had the opportunity to speak to Leslie Hairston, Alderwoman for the 5th Ward, which incorporates the South Side neighborhoods of Greater Grand Crossing, Woodlawn, South Shore, and our very own Hyde Park. Alderwoman Hairston knows the 5th Ward. She grew up in Hyde Park, attended the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, and started her aldermanic career in 1999. She has an amazing ability to connect the 5th Ward of yesterday with the 5th Ward of today. Our discussion spanned many topics: development in the 5th Ward, the Obama Presidential Center, the ward map debate, the 5th Ward's relationship with UChicago, and crime and policing. I think one word that can be used to sum up Alderwoman Hairston is that she is pragmatic. Talk and conversation are great, but for real impact, Alderwoman Hairston is a firm believer that increased funding, increased economic activity, and increased connections to the city's downtown and north side are critical to addressing social justice issues.
As always, check the show notes for information on the 5th Ward and a list of acronyms. Be sure to follow us on Twitter as well. Our handle is TweetYourAlderman, your spelled U-R. Tweets, retweets, those little heart emojis, it's all welcome. Okay, now on to the interview.
So we'll jump right in. Hyde Park definitely appears to be in your DNA. You were born here and raised here, and you've been an alderwoman for the 5th Ward since 1999. What do you think makes Hyde Park and your ward stand out, especially within the full landscape of Chicago?
Well, I think the most important thing about Hyde Park is its diversity and the way that we as a community have grown up with one another, gone to school with one another, and live with one another, learning about each other's differences, learning about each other, learning about different ethnicities, learning about different religions, and incorporating that into our daily lives.
And really going off of that theme of diversity, Hyde Park is a very attractive neighborhood. And we were curious, some of your critics do argue that you allocate more resources or some more time to Hyde Park than other neighborhoods in the 5th Ward. And we'd love to just hear about kind of your strategy about balancing development.
Yeah, that's always been a rumor, and it's something that people like to write about, but it is not true. And so you have to go where the need is. And because Hyde Park is such a strong community, the needs are not as great there as they are in other neighborhoods. So for example, when I got elected in 99, the two most important communities were Woodlawn and Greater Grand Crossing. The number of vacant lots, the number of homes that were in disrepair or vacant. And when I brought developers to say, can you envision this? A lot of them could not. And there was one gentleman by the name of Benjamin Van Horn. I think the company that he's with now is Green Line Development. He invested in properties on 66 and Maryland. Not only do we have that, but we have, the Aldi grocery store. There had not been a grocery store on Cottage Grove from 35th Street. That was the last grocery store until that Aldi came. And a lot of things like the nature sanctuary, that was just a pile of brush. And as someone from the area, and at the time, the crime was rape, and young women being snatched and raped. And I looked at that site and I said, that is an ideal place for someone with ill intent can go to harm, and it needs to go away. It needs to be cleaned up. And then we came up with a nature sanctuary. Some of the criticism, have been to crime. Well, we have been addressing them consistently over the years in the other neighborhoods. And so an example of that is, not only did I create the SSA in South Shore first before the Hyde Park SSA, but with that, we hired additional security to cover the commercial corridor. we also had cameras there. Only after the recent incidents in Hyde Park has the discussion begun about cameras on the commercial corridor of 53rd Street. So these are things that I was forward thinking in ahead of the time, and it's necessary because the need was there.
And where would you say the need is currently or has shifted to? So you mentioned Woodlawn and Grand Crossing, how now those areas are thriving. Where do you focus your attention now?
Well, you never not focus your attention on it, but you have to understand the parts of Woodlawn that I represent now are all built up. There are families living in those buildings. There are homeowner associations. There are block clubs. There's still areas that we're working on the economic development there, but that's usually because there's a private owner that does not wish to invest in the property. So it's not like focus on one community and then move to another. You're shifting all of the time, all day long.
You mentioned housing, and one thing that's coming up is the Obama Presidential Center. That is going to be built in Woodlawn, which is good, but there are also concerns people have surrounding housing and displacement. So this is probably going to end up being the weediest part of this interview. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly give a brief overview of the center for the listeners. So the Presidential Center will effectively serve as the library to honor the former president, and it will be situated along the western edge of Jackson Park. Ground was broken back in September of 2021, and the center is estimated to be complete by the end of this year. So while the website claims that it will bring jobs and economic development to the area, several residents feared that it would engender an influx of more affluent residents and businesses, while also pushing out Black residents. So a Community Benefits Agreement Ordinance, or a CBA, was passed back in 2020. And the goal there was putting safeguards in place to protect residents from being priced out. Specifically, correct. The ordinance included reservations for affordable housing and funding for low-income residents. The ordinance was focused on Woodlawn, but I know that there are other residents in the South Shore neighborhood that want a separate CBA.
I'd be happy to address that. And, again, I am limited by the areas that I represent. What most people fail to realize, and most journalists and everybody else fail to realize about South Shore, is that South Shore is represented by three aldermen. And so even in, the group that's out there now that is trying to ramp up something, they don't even know the lay of the land. They don't even know that there are 3 aldermen in South Shore. And I can only represent my portion of South Shore. And my portion of South Shore is built up, dominated by multi-unit buildings, both condominium, cooperative, rental, 2 flats, single family homes, which is different. And then I've got federally subsidized properties in South Shore in the area bounded between 67th and 71st from Lakeshore, South Shore Drive to Stony Island. So the beautiful thing about this, and even with Woodlawn, the portion that I represent that is east of the railroad tracks, is that most of that housing over there is federally subsidized. And that was done. I know that you all have heard about Dr. Arthur Brazier and Leon Finney, and those were the protections and that they fought for back in the 60s. So it is a guaranteed by the federal government to be affordable because that's what it was built for.
Yeah, and so what you have been quoted as saying in the Chicago Tribune was that instead of a CBA, you were in favor of centering a solution around condos, co-ops, and other support for shared ownership housing. Can you go into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, so I have been working with 30 different organizations, block clubs in South Shore that actually speak for South Shore and the residents that talk about what their needs are. And the needs are different because you have people that are aging in place in their homes, but their buildings need They need new roofs. They need new windows. They need the infrastructure to maintain it. And if they are retired on a fixed income, then it is impossible for them to get these things done as an association. Because number one, you've got the discrimination by the banks that won't lend to people of color. If someone that does not look like me and myself apply for a loan or a mortgage, the studies prove that we can have everything the same, and I would not get it. We cannot take the racism in the city of Chicago and everywhere out of decisions that are made or the plight that we are in, and we have to put it in perspective. But if you have been discriminated against all your life, against every twist and turn, it just makes it that much difficult for you to do as other associations do. So now that we, get in line with property taxes not being discriminatory, assessments not being discriminatory, still trying to get the banks to make loans, those are the issues that we are fighting with continuously. And so these are people that have worked, that have acquired a condo or a co-op, and, have not been able to maintain them for whatever reason. And so they need assistance programs. One of the things that we see are that there are lots of programs for low income and moderate income people, but, the retired professionals, there's not really anything there for them. And that's the gap that we're trying to fill, to provide assistance for. There is nothing for these people that have invested in the community, have remained in the community for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they make up a large majority of the community.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on something you were talking about, the fact that South Shore is represented by 3 different alder people. Obviously, the ward map is a hot topic right now in Chicago. For listeners who are not familiar with this debate, every 10 years after the census occurs, City Council convenes to redraw the boundaries of every ward based on population changes. Alderperson Hairston, I was curious, as you approach that, are there different strategies that are coming out in City Council, or do you have a preference in terms of wanting to keep communities together in the remapping?
Population trend in the city of Chicago for African Americans for the past 20 years has been trending down. This is not new. This is not a surprise. Chicago has been losing its Black population. So what we found ourselves with after the census was that every community, every ward, with the exception of the 5th ward, the 3rd ward, and the 4th ward, had lost population. So the only areas that gained population were the 3rd ward, 4th ward, and 5th ward. And, a lot of the 3rd and 4th ward was due to the remap from 10 years ago and the building up of the South Loop that brought population in. Not necessarily African-American population, but brought population in. So when you're looking at the south side of the city and you're looking at how to, draw the map, I don't think that it is any alderman's desire to split communities. However, there is always going to be one street, no matter what ward it is, that one side is one ward and the other side is another ward. But what we do have are common interests, right? We have common interest in making sure that we have safe communities, that we have economic development, affordable housing, that we have good housing stock, that we have job opportunities for our community members. That does not change in, at least I can speak for the South Side.
So that was one thing we wanted to ask as well, where, and I've heard this before, Southsiders, there's a surprising number of them that rarely, if ever, make it downtown. And I've also noticed, when I talk to people who come to the city to explore, they often don't make it to the South Side as well.